Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? We've covered some pretty geeky topics on the podcast here, but this time we're going to talk to someone who's even geekier than I am. All right, joining me today is Johnny Hemberger from Geek Therapy Radio. Now, the title of his podcast isn't some sort of fluke. It actually is a real radio show, which I think is just one layer of the geekiness that is this guy. Johnny, how are you doing?
Dude, I'm doing fine, and believe me, I've hit on this a couple times on the radio show. It is not beyond me how cool it is to be broadcasting electromagnetic waves through the universe on the actual radio here in Houston.
I know, right? Like the aliens are probably picking you up and learning all about the craziness that is planet Earth, and
that's true. And you know what? I've gone off on these little one or two diatribes. There's a whole show dedicated to this one idea, but my dad, not to get too real here, but my dad passed away in 2013, and he was a broadcaster for 30 or so years. So I like to think that me broadcasting my electric magnetic waves out into the universe, that maybe one day he'll pick it up on his radio wherever he is. Very poetic.
Well, or in the very least, you're keeping the flame alive, right?
Exactly.
And who knows,
so
maybe,
happy.
Maybe your ramblings and rantings are enough to keep the aliens from coming here and conquering us, right? They're out there listening to you going, oh man, if this is what Earth is like, forget it.
See, I think if we're the first signal they pick up, they tune it to our Earth, and they're like, oh, let's contact them. And then their leader's like, wait a second, let's just wait. Let's just hear what they have to say. And then they get to my show, like, no, we'll skip.
Either that or they discover YouTube.
We're not, right, we're not going to give this planet warp.
Yeah, never mind.
not let them in the Federation.
They're not worth conquering.
Right.
Skip them.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I've been on your show a couple times now. And
the best shows.
I know we kind of talked earlier before this episode what we were maybe going to cover. I'm going to throw you for a little bit of a loop here, but I think you're good for it.
Bring it.
On one of the first shows that I was on, we were talking about, geekdom, nerddom, and all that. And I had mentioned how I was a really big fan of Back to the Future, both when I was a little kid and still today. And how I had some, let's say, contacts in the industry, and I was able to actually see one of the original time machines that they used on the film.
Right.
Back in the early 90s, before they sat on some back lot and got all rotted out and horrible and had to get restored.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty geeky thing, right? To actually see one of the real time machines. But,
yes, absolutely.
But I think you one-up me. Johnny, tell me about your DeLorean.
Well, for all your viewers, I always say, I want to say listeners, because that's my medium is listeners. For all your viewers who are unaware, which is all of them, I do have a 1983 DeLorean DMC-12, which I think makes me the king geek. It's one thing to love Back to the Future. It's another thing to go out and buy the actual DeLorean. I will say, it is unmodified, unmolested. It is not a time machine replica. For one, I don't have the money to do that. That costs a lot of money. Two, I personally think that there's enough replicas already. And every time someone makes a replica out of their DeLorean, my bone stock DeLorean goes up in value because it's like one of the, even fewer remaining, untouched DeLoreans. And when I say untouched, I have not restored this thing. I have addressed the brakes. I had the brakes and calipers redone. I've had the fuel system redone because it was in storage for so long. But that's really it. And I used to actually, this is going to throw a lot of your viewers for a loop. I delivered pizza in the DeLorean for a couple years, which is crazy.
That's how they're going to make them laugh, or they're like running away right now. Like, what?
No, I think they turned up their browsers. What? This guy delivered pizza in the DeLorean?
Yeah, or they just tuned out one of the two. Forget this guy.
No, I think it brought him in. It brought him in, baby. They're hitting that subscribe button right now. Your likes and subs just shot through the roof on this video.
How many miles did you put on the thing delivering pizzas?
Not that many. Maybe 10,000 or 12,000.
Okay.
It has, up to this point, it has about 38 or so thousand miles total.
Wow, that's not bad.
It's not bad. It's right in that perfect butter zone.
Yeah.
For anybody interested in DeLoreans or any classic cars in general, when you see, super low mileage, barn find, super low mileage, that means it needs work.
Yeah.
Also, on the flip side, if you find one that's super high mileage, that can be bad too. So if you find a classic car in the tens of thousands of miles range, depending how old it is, that means it got run regularly, but not so often that it caused unnecessary wear and tear in the engine. So there are DeLoreans out there, in my case, there are DeLoreans out there with well over 200, 300,000 miles, because there are some OG Wall Street dudes who bought them back in 1981, 1982, and have just been cruising in them ever since. It's crazy.
Yeah, I bet. So walk me through it. Like, when did you get this thing? What prompted you to say, you know what, I'm going to do it. I've wanted one of these for a while or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How do you come to a decision to buy a car like that? Because that's not, I think, the kind of thing that most people would actually do. I mean, I'm sure there are tons and tons of geeks like us who just kind of sit there and daydream about, it'd be cool to buy a DeLorean, but there's quite a leap to go between wanting something like that and actually going and doing it.
I'll tell you what helped the most is that I got it 18 years ago, before it appreciated so much in value. So I got it in July of 2000. My mom and my grandma helped me. I was working at Subway at the time when I bought it, and I just gave them every single one of my paychecks to pay for the car. And when I bought it in July 2000, we bought it for around $10,000.
Wow.
Which even then was pretty good. Now I honestly get offers fairly regularly. A couple times a year, people coming out of the blue, I'll give you $30,000 for it as is. And you got to remember, see, I put 10 grand into it, or I bought it for 10 grand, and then I probably have 5,000 or 6,000 into it since then. So total, I'm sitting on $16,000 or $17,000 investment, give or take, and I'm getting regular offers for 27, 29, 30, up to 35 grand. So I'm still in the black. I'm still in the black, like twice as much as I paid for it. But here's the thing, everyone watching right now, it's not for sale. It will honestly probably never be for sale. It's an heirloom thing. A lot of people, and I don't mean to talk so much on your show.
That's why you're Colin, on here, dude.
Okay, we discussed this previously. We said the more you talk, the less work I have to do, and vice versa. So,
I think my audience is tired of hearing me waffling around for a while.
Okay, so you just shut up for the rest, and I'll take
it's your show now, Johnny. I'm bailing, buddy.
Right. Peace out. Yeah. I'll turn the lights off when I'm done.
Yeah.
No. So, where were we? I got the car, and a lot of people get into DeLoreans or classic cars, and they love the movie, but actually buying the car is biting off more than they can chew. They don't realize that it is a classic car like any other, and depending on how much care was taken of the car, it can need a lot more work beyond what you purchased it for. The rule of thumb right now is that it takes about $30,000 to have a nice running DeLorean. Mine is nice running. So let's say you find a barn find from a little old lady who has no idea what she has, and she sells it to you for $7,000, which is a miracle, but not unheard of. A $7,000 DeLorean is going to take an additional $23,000 before you can even think about driving it on the weekends. So,
how many of those barn finds do you think are still out there?
I don't even know where to estimate.
Do you think we're coming up on the end of them? Do you think we're going to get to a point where pretty much all the DeLoreans that are still in existence people and are driving around in, or?
That's a good point. There were about 9,000 made originally from 1981 through 1983, and about 6,500 to 7,000 are still registered and on the road. So if you do the percentages of that, that's a very high percentage of DeLoreans, which are which are mythologically known to be these horrible, crappy cars, you still have an 80% or whatever it works out to percentage of those that were made 35 years ago that are still running and rolling today. That's a pretty good average for any classic car. But to answer your question, the reason why my DeLorean shot up in value $7,000 or $8,000 just in the past 2.5, 3 years is that we millennials, those of us who grew up watching Back to the Future, are now in our early 30s or mid 30s or late 20s. We've got our careers going, so now I'm excluding me, but some of us have money to throw around, and it was our dream car, as a kid, and so they're being scooped up and they're being found in barns every once in a while. Every few months I read about a new DeLorean being found in a barn. So I think with this resurgence in popularity, and that our demographic is coming to the age where they can actually buy their childhood Back to the Future dream car, they're getting scooped up. They're getting scooped up right now pretty quick. So that's a roundabout way to say I think the last barn find we're probably still 10 years out from most of them being scooped up, and I don't see a real end to the appreciation of them. I think there's going to be another kind of tick up in the appreciation value once people my age hit that midlife crisis.
Right. Yeah,
dude. And by the time they hit,
right?
Yes, and by the time they hit their midlife crisis, by that point, 20, 30 years, they might be willing to shell out six figures for this thing.
Yeah.
So even at that point, even given inflation and everything like that, we're going to see another bump, I predict, when I turn 55, 60 years old. Even still at that point, not for sale.
It'll be real interesting. Yeah. This is something that I've been thinking about. Actually, there are 2 points that I want to raise. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of hit me the other day. One is to kind of cover that whole midlife crisis kind of thing, when mm-hmm. we're 55-ish years old. It's going to be really interesting to see what like the Barrett-Jackson auto auctions look like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like now it's all these old muscle cars and stuff.
I totally see what you're saying.
When we're 55, it's going to be DeLoreans and like Hondas and Toyotas from the 80s and 90s.
Dude, you know isn't that
going to be wild?
That is, and it's gonna be so cool. But what's also gonna break my heart is you're gonna see like first generation Prius. No, there's no cool factor to it at all. I don't see the first generation Prius being a prize.
Well, they were definitely less ugly than the current Prius is.
Oh, that's. Yeah, I don't like Priuses. I love the technology.
Yeah, I appreciate Toyota for what they did with the Prius.
Yeah,
I find it really surprising at just how well the general public picked up that car. Like you just see them everywhere, right? For being technologically kind of a weird vehicle, they're mm-hmm. everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere.
They are everywhere, and I don't know where you live, but I know basically a general region of where you live. But down here in Houston, we see Teslas all over the place. Where in the rest of the country, you might see a Mustang like 20 times a day. Mm-hmm. Just driving, 12 miles to the radio station, I see a dozen Teslas, Model X, Model S's. There's even a couple Model 3s in our parking garage, which is weird because, I watch on YouTube and I see people reviewing Teslas or people talking about Teslas and they're like, it's a super rare car. You don't really see them that often, but I don't know where all your viewers, you're scattered all across the country. I'm looking at the camera right here, viewers. You guys are all over the place. So maybe, in the comments below, not to commandeer your podcast too much here, Colin, but let us know if you see a lot of Teslas riding around, because I'm genuinely curious. Because when I see people say how rare the car is, I'm like, I see 12 of them a day.
And I think it is a regional thing, because I see maybe 2 a week.
Okay, see, that's still pretty good.
They're definitely not like super uncommon here, but I've never seen a Model 3 in person.
I've seen a few Model 3s.
It's predominantly Model S. I think I've seen maybe 1 or 2 Model X.
Yeah.
And that's it. But what's interesting about the Teslas, and I actually think it kind of parallels into this other thought that I had about the DeLorean, is The DeLorean is a geek car for people who aren't car geeks.
Amen.
You know what I mean?
Preach.
It's like...
Preach, yes.
It's like you wonder how many people have DeLoreans who have absolutely no idea how they even work.
Yeah. Oh, and here's what I say. I say DeLoreans are known in 95% myth and 5% truth, because all the myth that surrounds it is sexy and it's fun to talk about, and it makes people feel better about whatever car that they have. And then there's 5% truth, which is unsexy. See, mine's an 83 model, and all 83 models, and correct me if I'm wrong,
were made in 82, right?
They were actually made in 81, 82. They were kind of hodgepodge. They were the ones that didn't pass quality control and went back in. So the 83s are really like the best ones because they got all the updates. They have the best, I'm using quotes because it's a DeLorean. Right. They have the best components, and they're actually pretty reliable if you just change the oil and everything. The damage was done with DeLorean. There's a whole lot of factors that go into it, but the damage was done with DeLorean when they sent the press sample back to the United States because they were built in Ireland. Mm-hmm. They sent the press sample back to the United States because they were on an ungodly timeline to produce these cars.
Yeah.
They sent one over for a review, and the ones they sent over in the first batch for the press to test drive and review had inadequate alternators. They just slapped a tiny alternator in there, so the batteries weren't charging. The electronics had no juice, so you'd be driving down the road, turn on your headlights,
and the car would just die.
The car would die.
Yeah.
So they didn't put their best foot forward in that. Every DeLorean since that first batch has a big, I believe it's Motorola alternator in there. That's the power issue is not a thing on especially mid to late model DeLoreans. They're pretty much buttoned up because they had 2 or 3 years. Not a long time, but the later years of production in any vehicle are always better because you learn from what was going bad with the first one. So, and then the second one, you learn even more. So by the time you get to the third generation of DeLorean, they were good. And the same thing can be said for the Altima. I remember when the Nissan Altima came out in around 2000 or 1999, and it looked all neat and kind of futuristic. It had those cool, like, clear tail lights. There were some recalls, if I remember, and some big time quality issues with the first generation of Nissan Altimas. So, or the refreshed Nissan Altimas. So that's the case with the DeLorean. It never got out of that phase to really button up the issues. The 1984 DeLorean was supposed to have, and they were about to release it before the company went bankrupt, a twin turbo. It was the same engine, twin turbo, and it was going to be the fastest production car in the world at that time. But, history has written itself. DeLorean went under before he could release that. So he put out a car that was, for the money, you could also get a 911 turbo.
Right. It was not a good deal on paper.
Correct. It looked like nothing else on the road.
Right.
But the performance did not match the price. The performance was actually very average for all sports cars of the day. Even the Corvette and Mustang, it was better than those. It had a better power to weight ratio than the 81 Corvette. But it still didn't. It cost more than a Corvette. Cost way more than a Corvette. It cost, like I said, Porsche 911 money. So what you were getting for your dollar was a car that was a few seconds slower than a Porsche 911. Back then, cars were not that fast. So what was a 911 back then? Maybe 6 seconds?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to remember. Like the original DeLorean, no upgrades or anything. It was only like 140 horsepower, 150, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was around 138. What I meant 6 seconds was for the Porsche. Did I mention that? The Porsche 911 in the same area.
There's no way the DeLorean would do that.
No, DeLorean does not.
But I mean, it's like,
it does not.
You would think that, what they called a sports car back then, 138 horsepower, and I'm sure there were more expensive cars that were maybe in the 150 horsepower range. It's like, isn't that what a Prius does? I mean...
Yeah, well, I think a DeLorean still beats a Prius. DeLorean gets to 60 around...
Oh, you'll look cooler in a DeLorean, that's for sure.
Oh, okay, let's put it this way. If you're showing up at some highfalutin place and you're trying to impress people, what car are they gonna crowd around? a DeLorean or a Mustang?
Oh, you'd like forget the rest of whatever event you'd show up at. Like
You are
it
the
would
event.
almost be a social faux pas to show up in a DeLorean because
I
you would
thought about
upstage
that.
the whole thing, right?
I have deliberately not taken the DeLorean to some things because I don't want to,
Don't want to be
wear
that
white.
guy, right?
I don't want to be the guy wearing white at somebody else's wedding,
Yeah.
so to speak. So that's been a big consideration, and it's kind of funny you mentioned that because it gets lots of attention, tons of attention, and there's sometimes that I won't drive it around just because, I need to get to where I'm getting in a timely manner.
And you would just get stopped and you'd have to stand there for like 45 minutes answering questions.
Exactly. So if I went to especially like if I went to GameStop or to buy a video game or something like that, went to Fry's or went to Micro Center or something like that, I can't do that in the DeLorean
Right.
unless I'm prepared to take questions
Right.
for the next 20, 30 minutes.
Well, so what
Because
you do is you can still do that now. Actually, Johnny, I'm doing you a favor here, buddy.
Yeah.
What you do is you get some business cards printed with the URL to this podcast episode,
Yes.
and you just hand them out.
Yes. That's I already knew where you're going with that.
There you go.
That's a great idea.
There
And
you go.
for viewers, honestly, I do have a video on my channel. It's one of my most popular videos. It's an in-depth, non-glorified review of my DeLorean.
Oh, even better.
I didn't see. There's plenty of DeLorean reviews on YouTube. There's plenty of car reviews on YouTube. The way I present this review is: here was a DeLorean that was daily driven and delivered pizza in that has not been restored to be a museum piece. It is a car being used. So I didn't clean out any of the junk from it. I didn't clean it up or shine it up. I was like, here's what a DeLorean is, and I get really close in. I made a point in that video to really show up close parts of the car that I haven't seen any other review really showcase. Not showcase isn't the right word, but for instance, there's a little storage thing behind the driver's seat. You flip it up and it's a lock, kind of like a lockbox back there.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen that in any other DeLorean reviews. So in mine, I don't draw much attention to it, but I get the camera and I show it, and I show the key unlocking that little storage thing, and I show inside there. And there may be people who love the DeLorean, who grew up loving the DeLorean and just dream of that car. They've got it on the poster. It's their dream car. So in this video, I was trying to show them all like the aspects and different angles and little things about it that they haven't seen anywhere else, to give them more of an up close personal feel to it. And in fact, there's one guy on there who commented, "This is like my 100th time watching this video." because it just gives me such a good sense of, I feel like, I'm in the car, I'm sitting in it, or I can touch it. Like what you're doing here, it's such a good imagery. And this video doesn't have 100,000 views or anything like that, million views or anything like that. It's just it's for the purist. So.
Well, and the big
interested.
thing, I think, with a video like yours is, especially compared to all the other DeLorean reviews out there, you actually own the car.
Yeah.
All the other
That's true.
DeLorean videos that I've seen have always been from the perspective of someone who regularly reviews cars, and it's their first time ever seeing a DeLorean.
I think
so.
also,
They're just sitting there. They're all flustered the whole time they're doing it. They've got this big grin on their face. They think it's the best car in the world. The thing, and maybe it's an original one that's never been upgraded, so it's got the original performance, and the thing is just slow compared to all the other cars they've ever driven, but they're still just eating it up, right? And someone in your perspective, it's like, yeah, look, it's a car. I mean,
Exactly. And I go over mundane details. It's like, it gets about 30 miles to gallon on the highway, which is pretty good.
That is pretty good.
It's a very low drag coefficient. People say, oh, it's a small motor and doodly-doo, but it's got a drag coefficient 0.34, I believe, last I checked. It's in the low 30s, which is pretty good even for today. So it just slips, and it goes bone stock. It'll go up, the manual will go up to 125 miles an hour even today. That's not because the engine is super powerful. That's just because physics allows it to slip through the air to get your momentum. It takes a long time to get to 125 miles an hour.
I bet.
It takes a little while to get to 88, not forever. But really, it's enough usable power for daily driving. Like the average, even if you're in a Lamborghini and you needed to merge onto the freeway, you're not doing 0 to 60 in 3 seconds.
Right.
You're gonna get up you're gonna stop at the light, and you're gonna get, and you're gonna, by the time you're doing 60, even in a Lamborghini, even in day-to-day traffic, it still might take you 30 seconds before you're actually cruising at 60 miles an hour. So it's got enough power. I had an old Volkswagen Beetle that would probably take 45 seconds to get up to 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That was actually slow.
Yeah.
The DeLorean just doesn't, it's just not as fast as it looks. It weighs the exact same amount as a Toyota 86 slash Subaru BRZ slash Scion FRS. Scion's not around anymore. It weighs the exact same. The DeLorean weighs the exact same as that car. It just has 70 less horsepower as that car. So you put a few more horsies in there, and it actually it's a great car. You put some more horses in there, and it's
and
wonderful.
People are doing upgrades like that, right? I mean,
I've driven ones like that.
That's one of the things that you also kind of wonder. I mean, especially with considering how few of those cars they made. Do you worry about parts availability and stuff? Like, if the thing breaks, are you concerned that, like, what if you can't just easily find another one of those parts or something?
Absolutely not, because one of the luxuries of me living in Houston is that my mom's house is 10 miles away from DeLorean Motor Company's world headquarters in Humble, Texas, and parts. See, when DeLorean went under, he had enough parts laying around to build 30,000 more cars.
Wow.
He promised that many. He had all the tooling, all the parts, everything available to make 30,000 cars. He only got to 1/3 of that. So there are literally enough parts laying around to build several thousand more cars. So there's not any rare parts for the car. The rarest part for the car, I believe, is the front driver's side fender. The stainless steel, that's not the body that bolts onto the fiberglass body, because John DeLorean's idea was you get into a quote unquote fender bender, you just unbolt that fender and then pop another one on. It was kind of genius and low cost in that way. But when the factory went under, they were, pressing those left front fenders out of the steel, mill or whatever they were doing, but they got the word, shut it down, boys. So they only made,
so they made more lefts than they made rights.
They made like way fewer lefts. Like, they made thousands of rights, hundreds, if not maybe thousands of rights, hundreds, if not thousands of the other panels.
Gotcha.
At least hundreds. But the left front panel, that's when they shut down the factory, when they were first starting to make those. So they didn't get around to making a lot of those. So it's funny. You look at the right fender for the DeLorean, and it's like, a few $100. You look at the left fender for the DeLorean, thousands. What? It's not just a mirror image of the other thing. Well,
really.
It is, but they just didn't make a lot of them. But the other parts, you can buy complete engines, you can buy doors, you can buy the gas struts and the doors cost $20 a piece. You can get those at the hardware store. It's a normal car. He designed it to be what he called the ethical sports car. And I just alluded to that with, you get to a fender bender, you dent one of the panels. The idea was you just take it to the dealer, they pop off the panel and pop a new one on while you wait. It wasn't, as long as the actual fiberglass body wasn't damaged. Had 5 mile an hour bumpers front and back. It has those, which a lot of cars don't have nowadays. It has these vinyl or hard plastic, whatever you want to call it, not PVC. It's a plastic. These protectors, these stripes that go along the side of the car to prevent door ding. To prevent the door dings.
Yep.
So the other myth is, speaking of doors, is that people say, well, how do you get out of the car if someone parks too close to you? It takes almost no space for the doors to open.
They go more up than out,
They go
right?
up. Exactly. They go up, not out. So I did a demonstration, this actually in my DeLorean video, where I park my normal daily driver right next to it, like way too close, and I get out of my normal daily driver, and it's quite a chore. It looks silly. I thought about taking it out of the video because I look really stupid, but I painted the picture. So I got in the DeLorean. I did a nice clean cut where I get out of the DeLorean, no problem. I didn't move anything. I'm still the same distance, but the door goes up. It doesn't go out. It goes up. So that's one of the myths. Debunked.
Well, there you go. So trying to remember where else I was going to go with this one.
DeLorean parts are easy.
DeLorean parts are easy.
My Audi costs way more to maintain.
Well, any
than
German
DeLorean.
car, I think, probably
Holy
would,
crap.
right?
it like makes my heart like drop. I love I call her Rowdy. She's a 2010 S5 small block V8. She's wonderful. But when I need to take her in for a part,
hold your breath, huh?
Like even they quoted me, and I'm not going to take it to the dealer to do this, but to change the clutch since it's a 6-speed, because as God intended, the clutch is going. They quoted just for the pad, just to parts and labor for the clutch. Simple job, $5,000.
Ooh.
And I told him straight up. I said, well, whenever it needs a new clutch, I'm at 130,000 miles now. When it needs a new clutch, I am just going to sell it or trade it in or something. I am not dumping $5,000 in there for a clutch at all.
Yeah, that's.
But the DeLorean clutch, maybe 1,200 total.
So yeah, that's like what a regular car would be.
Yeah, my GTI was 12. When I had a GTI back in the day, it was 1,200 for a new clutch, and that was because it was quote unquote it was a big clutch because it was a turbo 4-cylinder. Whatever. It's just because it was German.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so the other thought that I had was, it's that whole concept of like never meet your heroes, right? Like how big into DeLoreans were you when you got yours? And now that you own one, or thinking back to when you first got it, is it what you thought it would be?
It's better than what I thought it would be.
Really?
It's one of those cases where you hear, like you said, don't meet your heroes. I still open. This kind of tells you what kind of cloth I'm cut from. I still open the garage door, and I see the DeLorean in there. Like the door goes up, just like in Back to the Future 1, where the truck's door goes up and it's unveiled. I get that feeling every time I open the garage door.
You rig up the fog machine so that when the garage door opens, it starts shooting the fog out and everything?
If I open the garage door and there's a bunch of smoke, then...
Plays the music.
I've got some big problems if there's smoke coming out of it. But I'm just saying that when the garage door goes up and it unveils the tires and then the bumper that says DeLorean in silver, and then the big tail lights, and then the louvers, and then you see the stainless steel, I still get that same feeling I got when I was 7 years old watching Back to the Future. I get that right now being almost 35 years old, opening the garage and seeing the DeLorean. I love that car. That's why I say it's never going to be for sale. You have to bring me a big suitcase full of FU money for me to sell it. Like,
and then you turn around and go buy another one with it, right?
I would.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I would. I don't want to say I can't live without that car. It's more, there's a lot of sentimental value wrapped up in it too, because me and my older brothers would film our own versions of Back to the Future using my dad's Handycam.
Nice.
So there's a lot of childhood memories wrapped up in it. It's the first car that I bought that I work for. I deliver pizza in it. I used to cram. It's a 2-seater. I used to cram 4 people in there at a time, carpooling. So I would sit in the driver's seat. 2 people would sit in the passenger seat, and our smallest friend would lay back in the little baggage parcel area.
I was going to say you'd stuff him in the trunk up front, huh?
What? See, that's an idea. No human being could fit in the trunk up front. That was designed to carry a set of golf clubs, and even that you're stretching it. It's enough space for a weekend getaway, but it's not a U-Haul trailer. That's for dang sure.
Very cool. I've never actually talked to anyone who's owned one of those cars. I see them driving around pretty rarely in the area. And like I said, I've seen them in person. I've got to sit in one. I've never gone for a ride in one, but
they're smooth.
It's kind of reassuring to hear that it's not one of those cars where it's overhyped, and it is this cultural icon of the 80s in the very least. But to hear that it kind of lives up to that is refreshing, I think.
For me, it lives up to it. Like we were talking earlier, some people bite off more than they can chew. But all ages love it. Little kids know what it is and love it, and old grannies in their 90s. My grandmother's is 96. She loves it. I have old people from all walks of life, young, old. They all know what the car is. They all walk up to it. They all love it. And when I said earlier I would have to take questions for 20, 30 minutes, that's because I will do that, and I do do that. I am not the a-hole who shows up in a Ferrari and says, don't touch this, don't touch this. I let people sit in it. They sit in it. I let them touch it. I don't let them drive it, but I let them run their fingers on it. I let them do almost whatever they want with it because I put myself in their shoes. Or I think of when I was a little kid, if I would have seen one of these around, it would have made my entire life if whoever had the DeLorean would have let me touch it or sit in it or take Instagram pictures with it, which is what happens most of the time.
Yeah.
I love that. I love seeing that joy in people's eyes, and I love bringing that joy to their heart, which is, which is what my entire radio show is about, / podcast is about, is bringing that joy to people, to reignite that passion that they had when they were little kids, when they saw something cool or talked about something cool. So I try to give that to people when they walk up and see the DeLorean.
And speaking of your radio show, I realize that we've been talking about DeLoreans and cars and that kind of aspect of geek culture this whole time, but you cover way more than just this, right? I mean,
you're... Oh, yeah.
I know you're definitely into video gaming and especially Game Boys, that kind of stuff. What else do you cover?
What else? The motto of my show is that we're all geeks about something. So whether you're into cars, people who are into muscle cars don't think of themselves as geeks. I like muscle cars. I'm not a geek. You are a geek.
Yeah.
You're a geek about cars. So you can be a geek about computers, not just computers in general, but PC gaming, building computers, airplanes. I make a joke that you can geek out about sewing. I don't talk about sewing so much on my show, but astronomy, Legos, a very common thing I say is can I say ass on your show, Colin?
Hey man, it's YouTube.
I know. I know.
Just but, George Carlin, that's all I can say.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know you know what that means, so.
Yes. I say on my show, like, we're if you're listening to it driving around, you're probably a grown-ass man or woman. What is stopping you from stopping at the hobby shop or the toy store or something on the way home and buying a canvas and some paints, or even buying a set of Legos and just spending 5 to 10 minutes with it and seeing and kind of reconnecting with a hobby? Or maybe it was a hobby that you only were interested in, you never actually have partaken in, but just stop on your way home tomorrow or on Monday, whenever you're watching this video, the next day, just stop and even buy a toy, like buy a Hot Wheels car. This world has too much, I should really check my video, but this world has too much division, too much politics, and I'm all for the discussion, but working in radio, it's what I listen to and deal with all day long, 8 hours a day, so I try to be a little oasis in that desert of politics and vitriol where we, instead of drawing a line in the sand, I draw a circle in the sand.
Yep.
Like, hey, whether you're liberal or conservative, whatever, we all love Star Wars. We all love video games. We all love painting. We all love stars and astronomy and cars and music, and a lot of us are audiophiles, which is I thought what we were going to talk about. So my show is.
Oh, come on! You'd rather talk about your DeLorean than vinyl records.
Obviously, we're 43 minutes in. I don't know if you have to edit this, but yeah, I can talk about this for a long time. So I talk about everything on my radio show, and I highly encourage people to reach out to me and let me know their geek thing, because maybe they're super into mason jars or jarring or something like that. And I like to hear people being passionate about their hobby that the rest of us might not know a whole lot about. Because maybe someone will hear that person speaking so passionately about their hobby and what they're into that the person listening might be in a very bad state of life. They might be terribly depressed or going through something terrible, and hearing about this new thing that they've never really thought about might be the spark, might be the lift, might be the ladder out of that depressive hole that they're in. So that's why I cover so many different topics on my show, is to educate and bewilder and enlighten people from all walks of life. And I love doing my show. I can talk forever, obviously.
Geekdom definitely brings us all together, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny, it's been a pleasure as always. How can people find you and your show and your podcast? What are all the formats you're on? Hit me with all that.
Thank you for letting me plug, Colin. Thank you for the marketing. The easiest way to find me is just type in Geek Therapy Radio with Johnny Hemberger into Google. the links will come up way before you ever get to Johnny Hemberger. But type in Geek Therapy Radio, just make sure it's with Johnny Hemberger, and honestly, just subscribe to the podcast on whatever app or device you're using. So if you're on an iPhone or iPad or Mac or whatever, just click the podcast app, type in Geek Therapy Radio, and I'll come up there and just subscribe that way. That is the best way to get involved with my show and to listen to my show, because the radio portion of it, it's the same. The podcast is the same as the radio side of it, just there's no commercials, which is very beneficial. But I put out the podcast about Friday afternoon, and the radio show airs here in Houston on KPRC 950 AM, midnight Saturday night. Well, technically Sunday morning, but it's sexier to say Saturday night.
Well, yeah.
So if you aren't in Houston and you're not driving around going from party to party or whatever to whatever on a Saturday night, just grab the podcast. I have it uploaded by Friday. I have a new podcast called Midweek Geek that does not air on the radio, and if you listen to Midweek Geek, you'll see why it doesn't air on the radio. It's not super cussy or anything like that. It's just like it's not as formal. Let's just say there's no time limit on it. So yeah, just Google or type into your favorite podcast app device, Geek Therapy Radio with Johnny Hemberger, subscribe, and the best thing you can do, because I don't ever ask for money, I don't have a Patreon or anything like that, nothing against Patreon, but the best thing you can do is just share it, subscribe, and then share it. Hey, there's this guy who's a real geek and he talks about lots of stuff, you might like it. So that would be great.
Well, speaking of Patreon, if anyone's interested in audio-only versions of my podcasts, I have them available as plain MP3 downloads for Patreon supporters at all contribution levels. As little as $1 a month gets you access. You can get plain MP3 downloads, you can listen in your browser, and there's also private RSS feed support, so you load it into the podcast player of your choice. Just something to think about. It helps support the show. Also, I'm curious as to your thoughts. We went through quite a bit today, not just the technical, nerdy aspects of DeLoreans and the cars, but just how they kind of fit into geek culture. I'm just curious what you think. Do you also own a DeLorean yourself? Have you ever seen one in person? Is it a car that you'd like to get into? Any fond memories that you may have? Just be sure to throw them down in the comments below. Anyway, if you like this one, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.